God damn, I need IPA.
This is Beering Ain't Easy, your podcast for beer humor, dad humor, and beer tastings from Texas and beyond. So crack one if you got one and turn it up.
Welcome to Beering Ain't Easy, Season 2, Episode 34 with Ryan and Drew.
Welcome back, loyal listeners. Have we got an episode for you? Not only today are we going to talk about a topic that never gets enough playtime on Beer Podcast, but it's also a topic, maybe the only topic, that Ryan likes more than drinking beer, and that's conspiracy theories.
I'm just asking questions, all right?
You're a naturally curious man. So where this all started, Ryan loves conspiracy theories. If there's like a little secret of the Beering Ain't Easy podcast, if you're like a loyal listener and you listen all the way past the end credits of our episode, you may have caught a few hidden gems where we've talked about this. But this all kind of started with a conspiracy theory known as birds aren't real. Ryan, would you like to, well, wait a minute. Before we talk about that, I think we need to crack a beer. What do you think?
I'm guilty of being one step ahead of you, Drew. I'm drinking St. Arnold Banger IPA because I knew today was going to be a banger of an episode.
Oh, yeah.
Just grabbing those low-hanging fruit comments to start off the podcast.
I had that one the other day. That's a solid beer. I like it.
Yeah, I'm into it.
I am drinking one of the podcast favorites here that I have not had enough lately of is Spindletap oldie but goodie Houston Haze.
Hey. I was going to call it a classic. It's not really like one of their flagships or a classic, but I feel like it's like basically what they're most known for at this point.
I think it could be considered a flagship at this point. When it comes in 12-ounce cans at HEB, you know it's a flagship.
That's true. Well, let's put a pin in Spindletap beers for later.
Oh, now I'm interested. Before we get into this, just remind our listeners, if you haven't already, follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook. Go to Cross the Streams Media. You know, like our podcast, follow it, give us some comments if you like what you're hearing. So back to the most important topics, which is conspiracy theories. Let's go back to birds aren't real, where this whole interest that I noticed in Ryan really shone through. So Ryan, tell me a little bit about birds aren't real.
So, I mean, birds aren't real isn't a new thing. It's been around for several years, but I've never really like cared about it. Like I've always thought like conspiracy theorists are like just super entertaining to follow. A couple of years ago, every week I changed my fantasy football team name to a team name that hinted at a different conspiracy theory. It was just like my little like trivia game of like, can you guess what I'm talking about here? Anyway, so yes, I've always been like, I just love hearing conspiracy theories. And so we were on a family trip down in Corpus Christi. I guess this was last summer.
Yeah.
And they drive up and down the beach all day long, like tons of cars back and forth. And everyone has flags that they're flying. Lots of politically motivated flags. And all of a sudden we were standing there and we saw this one, it was like a little dune buggy thing drive by, and there's this big flag flying off the back. Just this full thing that just says birds aren't real.
I had heard of it, but like I always associated it with like I thought it was like a real, like people really believed in this conspiracy theory. And I think there may be some people out there that actually do believe, which we can get to that later. But someone's like, no, it's like it's satire.
Like satire, yeah.
It's satire. You go to their website and then, you know, they directed us to the website. We looked it up and it was literally like 50 pages long talking about how the CIA in like the 1960s killed all the birds and replaced them with robots that spy on Americans. There's so much stuff on there. I can't even do it justice. Do you know any other highlights from the 50-page summary?
No, I mean, that's it. Like you can boil it down to just like 2 sentences. But yeah, like I've always known about it, but never really paid attention. But it just grabbed me because it is exactly what I love so much about conspiracy theories. It's just being so ludicrous that like, it just, I don't know, it's gold to me. And I just latched on. I love it so much.
And the flags are great. The t-shirts are great. I actually have a picture. We got a shout out to friend of the show and other brother-in-law, Will, that hooked us up over Christmas with some Birds Aren't Real shirts. And so we'll have to post a picture on social for that. But like, they're freaking hilarious. And it makes for good podcast end credit scenes.
Yeah,
At least to us.
I don't know about that. Yeah, but I like it.
Listeners, you can't see Ryan because we don't do a lot of video posting, but when he talks about conspiracy theories, he gets like such a look of joy in his eyes, like they kind of flip from side to side, like he's like talking about something he shouldn't be talking about. He gets a little shifty. It's pretty good. He's meant for this.
So yeah, you know, if my audio gets a little quiet, you know, it's because I'm looking over my shoulder while I'm talking.
I guess my thing with conspiracy theorists is that, like, there's people that really believe this stuff. And that's why, like, I thought that the birds aren't real was a real thing, because there's some really, you know, idiotic people that believe some really weird stuff. I think it's hilarious. But they've interviewed these guys and they've stayed in character. They've done protests about birds aren't real. Like, maybe they've convinced a few people along the way, but
my neighborhood had a community-wide HOA meeting last night. And I keep joking with my brother-in-law that I'm going to go to the public forum and talk about how we need to abolish our bird sanctuary section of the neighborhood.
If you do that, I need to come take a video. So how are we going to tie this to beer? Because this is not just a conspiracy theory episode. This is a beer conspiracy theory episode. So I know that you did some extensive research. So what do you got, Ryan? Like what's out there that, you know, the average beer nerd does not know about?
So I actually just finished my banger. I'm gonna bust into my backup. It's from Grimm Brewing in Brooklyn, New York, and it's called Tetraplex. It's a triple IPA, but just Tetraplex sounds sketchy and mysterious, so I feel like it fits perfectly with today.
I could get into that.
So I want to give the disclaimer off the top. We call it a conspiracy theory episode, but honestly, there's not that many beer conspiracies. So
speak for yourself.
I've come up with a lot of. This is almost like I'm like backdooring in another hot takes episode, because I'm going to throw out some things at you that I just think, and I want to get your feedback on. Oh, things that could be true, but we'll call them unsubstantiated rumors. How about that?
I would expect nothing less that you would come with your own homegrown conspiracy theories.
I'll start subtle. I'll just start bouncing some ideas off you, and I don't want to get kind of your gut reaction feedback on them. How about that?
That sounds good. I think we got a couple bangers. We can save those a little further in for the listeners.
The very first one is one that I actually mentioned in our peanut butter stout episode. And it's that Belching Beaver uses coffee in their peanut butter stout, and that's their secret ingredient that makes it taste a little different than most other peanut butter stouts. I've heard this on homebrewing websites before. When people are trying to make clones, they throw out that suggestion. I guess it doesn't really matter if they do or not. Like, what's your thoughts on a brewery adding something like that to their beer and not really saying anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of going a different direction. Like, oh, they're putting it in and they're saying our secret ingredient just to like draw up interest, and it could be something really boring. But if they don't tell anybody about it, then everyone's going to keep guessing wrong.
They don't say it's a secret ingredient or anything. It's just something they like secretly do. I don't know.
Okay.
It's like we're dipping our toe in the water here. All right.
Yeah, that's kind of mild. I think you need to like amp it up a bit here.
Oh, don't worry. We will.
I'll throw a softball out there too. So this one, this podcast started during the pandemic. And so one of the rumors that I remember going around rampantly at the beginning of the pandemic was people refusing to drink Corona beer because they thought they would get the coronavirus from Corona. They actually lost sales because of that. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I feel like those are the same people that really do believe that birds are doing surveillance on the American public.
Public schools have failed us, Ryan.
Can't argue with that. All right. Well, since you brought that subject up, do you remember the news that that Bill Gates bought a minority stake in Heineken?
Yeah. There
was a bunch of conspiracy theories that started floating around. I won't say a bunch, but it definitely got floated that the people that believed that Bill Gates was injecting microchips in vaccines started a trending hashtag online of boycott Heineken.
Oh, because he's got the microchips in the hops, huh?
Yeah, apparently they thought he was going to try to kill Heineken drinkers or something. I don't know.
So the people that like generally don't like Bill Gates, I'm assuming they're not big Heineken drinkers already. I don't know. Is that too far of a stretch? Maybe I'm being too stereotypical. Maybe there's some good old boy conspiracy theorists that also drink Heineken.
Hey, maybe that's the cream of the crop to some people. I don't know. The umbrella Heineken brand also owns Amstel, Lagunitas, Sol, and Tiger Beer, along with some others. So it's more than just Heineken. They got a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of microchips.
Yeah.
I'm going to come at you with one that got lots of laughs out of me because I feel like the listeners need to hear something good. So I'm going to throw some good stuff out there. So this one is my favorite conspiracy theory related to beer. And there was a herbalist that came out and did an interview, and it was talking about a component inside the hops, which is a phytoestrogen, and it imitates human estrogen. And so he actually made a comment that said drinking too much hoppy beers could cause men to develop breasts, so man boobs, as I may say, or if they drink too heavily, they could have a temporary form of impotence known as the brewer's droop. How do you feel about that theory, Ryan?
The brewer's droop.
I love that. I think you need to tell your brother that one if he's ever had the brewer's droop.
That's God, but you could use that in so many different ways. I'm going to remember that one for sure.
I thought about this and I was like, for one, I drink a ton of hoppy beers. So immediately I went to go look in the mirror to see if I was developing man boobs. But obviously this was discounted as a ridiculous thing. It is the chemical, the phytoestrogen is true, but it's in such a small quantity that it could never really do anything to you. But that did not stop people from using that as a conspiracy theory on the internet. And actually Haze Boys like posted something, a month or so ago that had a couple clips of this. I'm not even going to say the guys' names because they're Christian hate preachers and I don't even want to like give them the time of day. But there was two different like Christian hate preachers that were using that to try to preach to their people about not drinking alcohol. And they're like, you drink alcohol, you drink hops, it is going to make you feminine. And I was just sitting there. I was like, that's what they got. They're trying to scare people and telling them that being feminine, it's a bad thing, apparently, I guess.
And then he busts out a Busch Light hat. It's like, that's why you drink those crispy boys. You stay away from those hoppy beers.
That would have been better, but I think they were trying to discourage people from drinking alcohol. Which reminds me, okay, this is a story completely unrelated, but it's a great conspiracy theory tied to religious zealots. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and when we got married in the Catholic Church, we had to go through some like classes before we got married. And one of those classes was around natural family planning, which is basically having sex with no contraception or anything. And we literally had these people speaking to us before we got married about the statistics, how birth control doesn't work, and how the most effective method is to follow the calendar and schedule your nighttime encounters around that calendar. So how about that for a conspiracy theory? Brought to you by the Catholic Church.
That is interesting. I was a little worried, Drew. You got to be careful when you start bringing up conspiracies in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, there was times in the history where there were two popes, and it was like, which one's the real one? I don't know. There's two popes. Popes aren't real. But the end of that story, which this is one of Meredith and I's favorite story, was that we were sitting there like our eyes were so wide. I was like, we could not believe someone was like throwing out unscientific facts out there. And we started like they gave us these little notepads about where we could jot down notes on our thoughts and things like that. And so we just kept passing notes to each other like, these people are fucking crazy. What's wrong with these people? And then at the end of the class, they literally looked to everybody and they're like, okay, now we'd ask that everybody turns in their sheets to us. And we looked at each other and we're like, hell no. We just like crumpled it up, threw it in our purse. We're like, I'm not turning that shit in. I just put them on blast for the entire time we're sitting here. All right, bring us back to beer, Ryan.
Well, since I made that joke about the preacher putting on a Busch Light hat, I have seen a conspiracy online that Coors and Keystone is the same beer. It's just Coors is like the top half of the tank that's far away from the yeast and has a crisper flavor. And Keystone is the bottom half that's closer to the yeast and isn't as clean as Coors is. That's the conspiracy theory I've heard.
I've heard variations of that with all the macro beers. Like I'd always heard like Michelob versus standard Budweiser. Like it was just like different spots in the column where you're pulling the beer. I mean, has someone fact checked that?
I've never heard one way or the other, so I'm just blindly throwing it out there. And I
was kind of thinking of it like a distillation process. Like you take out the crude oils on the bottom, which is I guess your Keystone. And then you get to the top and you're like gasoline, sitting on top of all that oil.
I don't know. Maybe there's something to this one. If we're sorting it out, throwing it in the trash and keeping it on the list, maybe this one stays on the list.
Myth confirmed.
We'll go plausible.
Maybe. Definite maybe.
Since we're talking about shady sales tactics about what beer is what. Let's talk about that beer you're drinking, Drew.
Oh, don't even start talking about Spindletap when it comes to a conspiracy theory. How dare you?
I feel like I have to. I think we gave the disclaimer up front, but this one definitely falls under the unsubstantiated, me just coming up with something to rile Drew up. I can't even go through this with a straight face before I present this idea to you. These beers are so hoppy, so hazy, so intense. I feel like it has to be hard to control the outcome of the beer. So the idea is they just brew very similar batches every time. And then once they taste it and figure out, what batch they have, they kind of throw it into a product line. Like, oh yeah, this one turned out perfect. This is Houston Haze. But then they're like, oh yeah, this one got that weird variation that we taste sometimes. Let's make this one heavy hands. And every time they get a different variation, they put it to one of those new product lines.
How
and it's not
dare
an intentional variation.
How dare you? There's no way. There's too much quality control on heavy hands. It hits the points every time. But I will say that's like the running gag with hazy beers. It's like, hey, let's throw another label on it. Drop that shit. It's like you do all the hops, but like maybe you ran out of all the hops that day and you're like, okay, we're going to do 70% of these hops because we ran out. We're going to throw 30% of this other hop in here. New label, baby. Now that I believe, I think that's probably real.
I wish I have regrets. I wish I could have presented that to you without the disclaimer ahead of time and gotten your reaction. But speaking of running out of hops and brewing a variant, that's exactly what Great Heights did when they first opened up. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a true story. They were supposed to brew like their first IPA. It was during Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey disrupted their first shipment of brewing ingredients. So they didn't have the hops they needed. So they brewed like a Frankenstein IPA with other stuff that they had. And that was the first IPA they released. And I don't think it was Fruity Pellets, but it was something that was like, it turned out to be like a hit. And so they brewed the one they wanted to brew, but also kept the accidental one not accidental, but the backup one they had to brew. They ended up keeping both of them because it turned out so good.
All right. So I've got something. So I was going down the route. So can you like explain it? Because we had this conversation before this started where we were trying to find beer conspiracy theories on the internet and why it was so hard to find them. Do you want to explain that to the listeners?
Yeah. And I wish I had this beer to drink right now. If I would have had time to go to the store before this, I would have. But yeah, local listeners will probably remember a prominent IPA from a prominent Houston brewery. There's a Southern Star Conspiracy Theory IPA. There's also like a brewery, I think it's in Ohio, called Conspiracy Theory Brewing. So if you search for beer conspiracy theory, like there's nothing but just product talk on all the like brewery, beer can stuff. Like, yeah, it's hard to find anything through all that kind of stuff.
And it's really hard to find like the harebrained ideas. Like that's what I'm really looking for. Like, I don't know if I should have searched YouTube. That may have been a better location to find somebody's video about it. I need to learn how to get to the dark web. We'll find the good stuff in the dark web. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I went down this rabbit hole where I was looking for conspiracy theories, and then I started searching beer myths, and myths obviously takes you back to mythology. And I read this like interesting thing that I've had a beer called this before, but I never knew the history behind it. But do you know the history of Ninkasi?
No.
Okay. I'm going to educate the listeners here today. So Ninkasi was the leading goddess of ancient Sumeria. So they were in like 3000 to 5000 BC. They were like before the ancient Egyptians. But this Ninkasi was a goddess, and she was the goddess of brewers. And so she was in charge of brewing all the beer for the great gods. Not only she was put in charge of the harvest, beer, and brewing, but she was also the goddess of drunkenness and seduction, the passionate art of carnal love, and the cruel art of war. That is a fucking badass goddess right there. She's got it all. Each of her 9 children were named after intoxicating drinks or their effects. So like this all happened in like 3000 to 5000 BC. Does that not like fucking blow your mind?
Yeah, that's crazy.
But my favorite part to the end of this is that the Sumerians are considered the first civilization to have given up their hunting and gathering ways and become sedentary. Their emphasis was more on brewing than the martial arts. They treasured their beer and their bread. Beer was their sacred drink, a gift from the gods to be savored for joy, worship, and peace. I don't know if that's a conspiracy theory, but I believe in Ninkasi.
That's yeah. So I know there's the Ninkasi Brewing in I think it's Oregon. But yeah, I didn't know what that name meant. But now I guess it's probably common knowledge up there, kind of like St. Arnold's is the patron saint of brewers. It's probably like that's common knowledge down here. I'm sure it's the same way up there. But yeah, I never thought about actually looking up what Ninkasi actually meant.
Yeah,
so that's cool.
Some of the earliest literature around beers and drunkenness, they must have had it good back then.
Well, cool. We got a nice little history lesson tonight.
Yeah, that's a bonus.
We're building back some of the brain cells that we're killing off with the rest of the episode.
Yeah, this is no myth. She still exists. So Ryan, unrelated to beer, what are some of your favorite conspiracy theories of all times outside of birds aren't real?
Actually, I'll say this one first. This is like the most obvious one ever. But the fake moon landing thing is so funny to me because it's so dissected. And the reason why I bring this one up is because I was actually at Bad Astronaut yesterday. And every time I go, I always get the fake landing. And I appreciate so much that they have a beer called Fake Landing. So that's the one that just like is mind blowing to me. But one of my other favorite ones is that and this is partially true, there is a vault, like an empty room inside of Mount Rushmore. And no one's like ever been allowed to be in there. And supposedly it was supposed to be like this grand vault. And supposedly there's like nothing in there and it's just closed up. But no one's ever seen it.
I thought that's where John Connor went when he was trying to escape the AI from taking over the world in Terminator. Was that not the vault he went to?
I don't remember. But what I do remember is that in the movie Richie Rich, and they made their own family Mount Rushmore, and their vault was inside of that. And I didn't know it as a kid, but it was a nod to that real room.
Oh, dude, that's great.
Yeah, there you go. There's also one that's like some town in like Pennsylvania or something, where there was like an underground mine that like caught fire, and there's like enough chemicals down there where it's going to keep burning for like 200 years or something. And so they basically, it's like a ghost town, and everyone evacuated it because the underground's still like under fire to this day. And there's a bunch of conspiracy theories about how it's like actually a portal to the underworld or something. I don't know.
Ooh.
That's kind of a wild one too.
Dang. Straight to Hades.
Like that one sounds like it would be just the premise sounds totally fake, but it's true. Like there's a place where it's on fire underneath the ground.
I bet it'd be trippy as hell to see. They should make a movie about going through the portal. When we started doing this episode, I tried to listen to a few like conspiracy theory, like murder mystery podcasts, because I'm like, man, I could cut in some music and like bring some intrigue here. And then I was like, fuck it.
My mind immediately went to like the X-Files theme song.
do, 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 do. I did just switch beers though, so I thought I'd give a shout out to Urban South. I saw this one in HEB. I hadn't had it yet. It's just called the HTX Hazy Juicy IPA. It's a little bit lighter, and it doesn't taste like Houston Haze, so not all hazies are the same. Myth busted.
We've talked about it before, but you shouldn't need a can to that. And the can definitely adds a point or two to it.
Pretty sweet. So you mentioned X-Files, and so X-Files always makes me think of Area 51. And I went on a road trip when I got out of high school, and we went all the way to the West Coast, and we stopped in Roswell, New Mexico, and checked it out, and saw all the alien paraphernalia. And I had one of those posters that said "I want to believe" because watch that show. But like, wasn't there like a whole group of people that like showed up at Area 51 and like basically we're throwing this major protest to be let in? Like wasn't that like a thing?
It wasn't even a protest to be let in. It was, let's storm Area 51. They can't stop all of us.
Yes, that's what it was.
Like how, like, oh my God. Can you imagine like the massacre that would have happened if people would have actually gone through with that?
Yeah, let's storm an army base. That'd be great. So when you talk about most popular conspiracy theories in America, there's always the Kennedy assassination. That's got to be one of the ones that just completely pulled in all of America on that one. It was a second shooter.
Yeah.
CIA, man.
I was listening to something random recently, and they talked about that. They were basically saying that, that the shooters on the grassy knoll were from organized crime because JFK made a deal with organized crime to get elected, and he didn't follow through with his promises. So that was why they assassinated him. I promise I don't just listen to conspiracy theory podcasts.
Ryan is in his zone right now. He's like living his best life. Yeah. I mean, he did say that he changed his fantasy football name to a conspiracy theory every week. So I was trying to think of like more than two, and Ryan's just rattling them off left and right.
I forgot my fantasy team all of last year. The team name was called Questionable Birds.
Sounds appropriate.
Yeah.
I'm actually showcasing my The Birds Are Watching shirt as we speak.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of like the hot take episode where it's a little bit scattershot. We're jumping around all over the place. But here's an interesting one. When you go like not to HEB to go buy beer, what's your go-to spot?
My go-to nearby spot is Total Wine, but I don't know why, because every time I go, their beer's old, so it pisses me off. But I still go back like Stockholm Syndrome or something. I don't know.
They do have a lot. Like back when I lived in the city, it was always the Specs in Midtown. Like that was the one.
Oh yeah, that one's a good one.
Obviously, there's Specs everywhere. Total Wine is like a relatively recent newcomer to Houston, and when they started building in Houston, I had heard a rumor from people that there used to be like an unwritten like boundary where it was like specs wouldn't encroach on Total Wine and Total Wine wouldn't encroach on specs. There was like some imaginary like agreement, like boundary where like they weren't going to mess with each other. And I'd heard that specs did something to like break that agreement. And that's when Total Wine came into Houston and like opened up all these stores all over town.
Oh,
now we're getting into some juicier stuff.
But what was the thing that they did? That's the juiciest part that you left out.
I don't know. Apparently opened up in a location they weren't supposed to.
I feel like Specs has, I don't know, like downtown Specs is on another level, but like the average Specs that you go to is not near, like I find better beers at HEB. I'm going to be honest. Like it's not that great of a chain. If you're not going to a bottle shop, like HEB is probably my best go-to.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Like, especially my first house in Houston was like 43rd and Shepherd. It's better now, but it was a pretty bad area. There was a Specs right there, and it was one of those ones that was like aisles are only big enough for one person, bars on the windows, like a straight up liquor store. It's a little questionable what you get from some Specs.
Yeah, I agree.
You brought up the topic about how there was the joke that all hazy IPAs taste the same, which, just as a side note, I'll contend they're just all so hoppy and overwhelming that it just kind of blows out your taste buds. So it's like hard to really differentiate. I don't necessarily think they taste the same, but you know, there's like always these experimental hop beers, like experimental hop number 361. And like people will brew these like weird hop variants. They'll say like, yeah, it's one of our beers with a hop variant. How legit do you think those are versus just like mixing some hops together and not actually growing new varieties?
Whoa. I never thought about that before, but I am more interested when I drink a beer that says experimental hop on it. So it seems like a pretty a feasible ploy. So I'd say that's possible.
Yeah, it seems like it's way more effort for an experimental hop to actually like breed like, a mosaic and a citra together and seeing what that is like. Like, why don't you just take two of those hops, like smash them together and give you that and say that's the experimental hop? Like, what's stopping people from doing that?
That's fair. I mean, how much chemistry is really going on with these hops? We need to bring back Ryan Lear to the show. He knows all about those hops.
Yeah.
Yes.
I should have put him in the hot seat.
So there's this theory out there about experimental hops. True or false?
You used the conspiracy theory episode to bring all the guests that have ever been on our show, bring them back and just burn bridges left and right. Just insult their professions.
You're making up things that don't even make sense. Thanks, Beering Ain't Easy.
Which, speaking of guests on the show, I feel like this is like several weeks late, but I feel like we should at least mention it. Did you see Mirren on local news when they got broken in like twice in a week and she went to the Capitol to talk to him about doing something?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, she was making.
I saw the pictures of their the damage though.
Yeah, they showed the security footage on the news, and she got interviewed and was talking about it. She was like making this big push, for better like security for businesses and stuff. I was like, good for her.
Pretty fucked up. Hit a business twice. It's got to be the same people.
Yeah, for sure. So. Yeah, if any listeners haven't been to Star Sailor, go check them out, support them. They had to deal with that bullshit twice, so go check them out.
And if you have a clue to the perpetrators who broke their window, you can call 1-800-Beering Ain't Easy.
Yeah, don't call that. Actually call Crime Stoppers.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. So, Ryan, I'm looking at the OneNote, which you've extensively dropped your notes on, and I noticed there was a beer conspiracy theory that we potentially have not covered that may have a tie to Bad Astronaut Brewing. Would you like to throw out your wild and wacky idea here that is completely unsubstantiated, I might say?
I would love to, since I already said we're going to just burn all our bridges. So I've already attacked Spindletap And now I'm going to attack Bad Astronaut, one of our other favorite breweries. I'm not going to attack him. That's a joke. So I have a friend that deals with mergers and acquisitions in oil and gas. And I was hanging out with him. We were talking. I was telling him about how Paradigm Brewing opened like late 2021, like early 2022. And he was like the head brewer of Karbach. And then Bad Astronaut just opened like at the end of 2022. And the head brewer there, we hinted at it on the podcast with Bad Astronaut, but he was the brewer of innovation at Karbach. So the Paradigm guy did all their staples. Rocky did all the development of new recipes, basically. So it's like it was so random that both of them kind of left at the same time and opened their own breweries. Like that must have been a big hit for Karbach. That immediately put up his radar. And Karbach was sold in November of 2016. And he said a lot of times when you're buying a company that's like very like talent based, like brewers would be at Karbach, a lot of times there's a contract that comes with it. Like, hey, we'll buy you, but the head talent has to stay for, in this case, if they stayed for 5 years, that would have been like right around the time. So if they got bought, they had to stay for 5 years. And then after that 5 years lapsed, they could have both left and started their own breweries. So the conspiracy theory is Paradigm and Bad Astronaut only took so long to open because they had non-competes at Karbach and they weren't allowed to leave until recently. And so they both bolted at the same time.
Whoa. That's some deep shit right there. That's quite an accusation. There's only one way we can solve this. We've got to bring Rocky back on.
Yeah, let's bring him on and challenge him on the spot.
He may not do another episode with you because of that, but I'm here for it with the popcorn and the X-Files theme.
It's okay, Rocky. This is a safe space.
We'll turn the mic off, get the real scoop. Well, man, I think we may have tapped out on our beer conspiracy theories. We're stretching pretty far here if you're throwing Karbach former brewers on the table here. So maybe we should stop while we're ahead, Ryan. But this has been quite an intriguing episode. I've had a great time. I know Ryan has. He's still got the shifty eye thing going on. So Ryan, would you like to close our magnificent conspiracy theory episode out today?
Yeah, Drew, I think I've done as much as I can tonight. I'm all amped up. I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. My conspiracy theory muscles have got the brewer's droop.
Oh,
I gotta get out of here.
See y'all next time.
This has been a Beering Ain't Easy production out of Houston, Texas. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook or at our website at crossthestreamsmedia.com, where you can find our podcast and all the other great sister podcasts on our network.
This has been a Cross the Streams Media podcast.
Yeah, man, I've my conspiracy theory muscles are spent. They got the brewers Drew. God damn it. Bird watching goes both ways.